This is Visitor's Book and I'm Maya, your host. In this program, we're going to be meeting with diplomats and foreigners who live here in Pakistan, and we're going to find out what they really think about the country. So let's go. Our guest today is Jeremy Milsom, country representative of UNODC to Pakistan. So let's go meet with him. Hi, Jeremy. So nice to meet you.
Hi, thanks for having me on your show.
Of course, and thanks for having me here today. So it hasn't been such a long time that you've been in Pakistan now, 10 months, right? When did you first get here?
I arrived at the start of September last year,
Okay.
so yes, it's just about 10 months.
Yeah, so do you feel like you've already had the opportunity to get to know the country well enough, or it's still too early to say that?
Yeah, I think it's still too early.
Yeah.
There's so much to learn here, to see here.
Exactly.
So I feel at this point I've barely scratched the surface. So,
Right.
Yeah, I think maybe after a year I'll feel that I've got a better understanding and knowledge of the country.
Exactly, and now especially with the coronavirus, which has impacted all of our lives. I mean, you've probably been pretty much stuck at home, or have you been able to go to the office and take meetings at all?
Well, we took precautions and we've locked down and working from home since mid-March.
Right.
So we are working from home very hard. It's actually been very busy times.
Really?
We're a lot busier than we expected. Yes, perhaps half the time here I've been working from home. I go out maybe once a week for an in-person meeting.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, you're in a new country, but you're not able to go anywhere. So that might be a little bit frustrating, I guess. So when was the last time you were able to go back home?
Well, I haven't been home since the start of the year.
Right.
So
Been a
yes,
while.
6 months since I've seen my family.
Wow. So you must be talking to them on the phone or Skype or something like that all the
yes.
time.
I mean, we count our blessings, and thank goodness these days for the video conferencing and telecommuting. We can talk face to face regularly. So
Exactly.
it's nice.
Yeah. I mean, it must be kind of difficult being stuck in a new country so far away from your family, right?
It's hard being away from family, but I mean, I think millions of people around the world are in the same situation. So
Yeah.
I just console myself with that thought and look forward to when we can meet.
Yeah. So when you first arrived in Pakistan, was there anything that kind of, I don't know, caught your attention, something that you weren't expecting, something like that surprised you in some way about the country maybe?
Well, if I go back to first time in Pakistan, although I arrived here in September, I was managing an 8-country regional program before, including Pakistan.
Oh, really?
So I'd visited many times before.
Oh, okay.
But
Right.
actually, the first time I came here was, I think, about 10 years ago as a tourist.
Wow, fascinating.
I came as a tourist to visit a friend. I mainly just visited Lahore at that time. But, well, it was far more, the country was far more modern and dynamic than I expected.
Really?
I mean, I didn't know if I expected to see fast food restaurants and
Right. Yeah.
modern shopping malls. But yeah, I was impressed with how advanced the country was.
That's interesting because, you know, when I first came here, I also somehow expected Lahore to look like, I don't know, like the old city of Peshawar or something, and then you see like all these really well-maintained streets here and there, and like you said, shopping malls. It's kind of like, okay, what was I thinking, you know?
Yeah, I had a similar
funny.
impression for sure.
Yeah. And so how long did you stay back then? I mean, 10 years ago. It was just a quick visit.
Just 1 week.
Right.
That was just 1 week.
Okay.
And it was, I think, on my way back from Europe, and I had a friend here who I'd studied at university, so
Okay.
that was the inspiration for the visit.
What did they tell you about Pakistan? Like,
Well, I've travelled and worked outside of Australia for more than 20 years, so
Yeah.
I didn't really have any concerns
okay.
of that nature. I just love travelling and visiting new places and seeing new cultures, trying new foods.
Yeah. So it was just a new place that you wanted to see, basically. That's great. How long have you been with the UN now?
Well, I joined as a young professional in 1996.
Wow.
So that's actually 24 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes, it gives away my age. Before that, 3 years I was working with NGOs. So
All right.
it's 24 years, and with the same agency, with United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime.
Okay, wow. And how does it work with the UN? Like, you just get posted somewhere, or you get to have a say in where you want to go next?
Well, it depends a bit on the size of the agency. The larger agencies do have clear mobility policies and rotation. So usually you stay maybe 3 years in a country, and then you have a choice of where you go. UNODC is a smaller agency, so we have to apply to other posts. So we stay in one country until we're ready to apply for another post. So I've actually had very long postings in the countries which I've worked.
Okay, but was like Pakistan something that you said like, okay, I want to go there, or it just
yes,
happened?
this post came up, and having worked with counterparts here in Pakistan, I pursued the post and was lucky to get it. So I was in, my previous post was Tashkent, Uzbekistan.
Oh wow.
So yeah, very, very happy to get this post and to be here.
Yeah, and I mean, originally you're from Australia, right?
Yes, I'm Australian.
Where exactly?
I'm from a little country town in northeastern Victoria called Wangaratta.
Oh wow, never heard of that place.
Famous for it's a ski club. The Wangaratta Ski Club is the oldest ski club in Australia.
Wow. And then was there something that, like, I mean, did you always know that you wanted to work in a field like this? You wanted to travel the world and see new cultures. What inspired you to work in this field?
That's a really good question. I mean, as a child, I was always interested in people and places. I was a precocious and voracious reader, and I'd read about all countries in the world. So I had this fascination with other places and cultures. But then when I went to university as an undergraduate, actually, I wanted to be a physicist.
Oh, really?
And my first 2 years at university was very hardcore science, wanting to be a physicist. But then I took a unit in development studies about international development, and I just loved it so much. It just brought all of that back to me. And I ended up then diverging from my initial plan. So rather than working in a laboratory, at that time you could do split degrees. So I ended up with 2 degrees, a science degree and an arts degree in international development.
Okay, that's great. And that's how you somehow ended up at UNODC then?
Yes, I did my first thesis I have a development background in looking at development issues in the Pacific Islands region, Solomon Islands. And then my first job for 3 years before I worked for the UN, I worked for an international NGO, CARE International.
Okay, yeah.
So I got my first taste. I travelled to some different parts of the world and loved the work, and that's what inspired me to, I think, apply to the United Nations.
Yeah. Which countries have you worked in then, like, altogether? It must be quite a few.
Well, for UNODC, it's actually, this is only my 4th. I was 10 years in Myanmar.
Wow.
Almost 5 years in Afghanistan and 5 years in Uzbekistan.
Yeah.
With CARE, I had worked in the Pacific Islands, in Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands and Fiji, and supporting some other countries via distance, Kiribati and Vanuatu. And I also did a short assignment in Croatia back then. So I've worked in some quite a few different places.
Yeah. How would you compare those experiences with Pakistan, like especially Afghanistan? It's so near, but still quite different, right?
Well, it's a real privilege to work in this sort of work for the United Nations, because it's almost you learn as much, you gain as much as you give.
Yeah.
And it's just so wonderful to travel to new places and to learn about new cultures. So, you know, every country is different. Every country has their beauty and their attractions, and so I found every experience unique and rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it like, you know, in Afghanistan, a lot of people, when they think about Pakistan, they think it's going to be like exactly the same, like, you know, internationals who first work in Afghanistan and then come to Pakistan. But then, of course, that's not the case, because there you're really not that free to move around, and the security situation is very different from here.
Well, I'd visited Pakistan before I went to Afghanistan, and I knew what the situation was like in Afghanistan when I went, so I was quite well aware of the differences. When I first went to Afghanistan, that was in 2010, I could still travel. I was quite lucky.
Okay.
I managed all of ODC's provincial offices and programs, so I got to travel around the country a lot.
Yeah.
But of course the situation got a bit more difficult, and then it became more restricted over time where and when we could travel. But then in my previous post, I managed a regional program covering Western Central Asia. So I've actually been covering Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and the 5 Central Asian countries. So I'd done a lot of work where I have counterparts, officials from Afghanistan and Pakistan together working on issues. So yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. And where were you based in Uzbekistan? In Tashkent, right?
Yes, in Tashkent.
What was that like as a city if you compare it to Islamabad?
Well, I mean, having been in Afghanistan, where it is really difficult and you have lots of security concerns, it was really nice to be in Tashkent without security concerns. Right. So it's a very safe city with wide streets, open and green, and very friendly people. Similar to here, Islamabad, it's a very green city, wide streets, friendly people. Yeah.
Did you get to visit Samarkand in Uzbekistan?
Yes, I travelled all over Uzbekistan.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
Managing the regional program, I've actually travelled extensively in all the 8 countries. And but yes, in Uzbekistan, I visited Samarkand, Bukhara, Khiva.
Oh, that's amazing.
I even did one 4-wheel drive trip out to the remnants of the Aral Sea, which was quite an adventure.
Amazing. I mean, I've always wanted to visit Samarkand, like for all the old, you know, historical sites there. Like, it looks amazing. I'm so lucky you got to go there.
Yes, it's the history is amazing. It's well worth a visit.
Yeah.
All the old cities of Uzbekistan.
And what kind of projects were you working on there?
Well, I managed the regional component of UNODC's work.
Right.
We have a regional office in Uzbekistan. And essentially, if you look at UNODC, we have country-level programming, regional programming, and global programs. Now, most of what we do is at the country level, 80% of the work on building the capacity of countries to help them meet their obligations to the various treaties and instruments that we cover. But the regional program is all about bringing countries together. So I did, across the mandate of UNODC's work, I was frequently bringing all 8 countries together to talk about issues, be it drug trafficking or precursor trafficking, be it cooperation on criminal justice issues, illicit financial flows, sharing best practices on prevention of drug abuse and treatment of drug abuse. And countries would take turns hosting meetings. So
I see.
We'd host the meetings all around the region. So that's why I was visiting Pakistan before.
All right.
Sometimes Pakistan would host these regional meetings.
I see.
We'd bring everybody here.
Okay, that makes sense, yeah. And I mean, how many years did you spend in Afghanistan then?
Almost 5 years.
Okay, that's a really long time actually. And there you got to visit like all different cities and places in the country.
Yes, I travelled in, I think, about 14 different provinces.
Wow.
Before it became more difficult.
Yeah.
So I've been in Kandahar, Herat, Faryab, Badakhshan.
Wow.
A lot of there's a lot of beautiful places in Afghanistan as well.
Absolutely. And what about your family? Are they ever worried about you or your security when you're, traveling to all these countries?
Well, I think Afghanistan was a non-family post, so they couldn't be with me. And yes, there were worries, but we just managed that.
Yeah.
But my family were living with me in Uzbekistan.
Oh, okay.
But at the moment they're not. They may in the future. But
Oh, really?
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how everything goes with the coronavirus, right?
Yes.
But yeah, so now with the lockdown here, would you say you've enjoyed your time in Pakistan so far, despite the fact that you haven't been able to live normally?
Oh yes, I've absolutely enjoyed my time here. It's just I have such a great team. I have such great counterparts.
Yeah.
And we're working really well and doing what we can under the circumstances. It is challenging and frustrating with the COVID-19, but we need to do our best to support the country, to support Pakistan at this difficult time.
Absolutely. How would you say, like, when you move around, do you see like people following the SOPs here? Like, what's your sense? Like, do people take it seriously in Pakistan?
Well, it's challenging in Pakistan. I mean, Pakistan has done quite well. They locked down quickly, and I think at the start people were following the SOPs very clearly. But then no one expected it to take such a long, slow rise here, I think. And as time passes, there's a risk of complacency.
That's true.
And I think people just need to continue to be diligent to maintain the social distancing and the hygiene and the lockdown. I talk to my team via town hall every 2 weeks, and we talk about these issues and how we can help and how we can, maintain the discipline and do our part to prevent the spread of COVID.
Yeah. All right. Time to take a short break. I'll see you in a bit. Welcome back. I'm here in conversation with Jeremy Milsom from the UNODC. So let's talk a little bit about the work you do here with the UNODC. What are the main programs that you're running here in Pakistan?
Well, UNODC has a 4-pillar program here. The first pillar is all about strengthening the capacity of the country on borders and illicit drug and precursor interdiction. There's also a component on human trafficking, preventing human trafficking and smuggling of migrants, also cybercrime. Our second pillar is all about criminal justice and legal support. So we have big rule of law programs in the country where we support all steps of the legal process, from the police forces and first response to maintenance of evidence and connection between law enforcement and the courts, and strengthening court processes right through to prisons. Then our third pillar deals with drug prevention and treatment. So outreach, ensuring that there's strong messaging on drug prevention and education, and then also treatment for people who are using drugs. And then we have a fourth pillar, a counter-terrorism program, a large program called Pakistan's Action to Counter Terrorism.
Okay. And I mean, the main mandate is about drug abuse, right? Controlling.
Well, not for quite a long time, actually.
Oh, really?
UNODC used to be the drug control program.
Right, yeah.
But 23 years ago, it was merged with the UN Criminal Justice Division, Crime and Justice Division. So it became the UN Office on Drugs and Crime.
Right.
And since then, all mandates related to trafficking, crime, counter-terrorism, anti-corruption, all come under UNODC's mandate. So we have actually quite a broad mandate covering all aspects of crime prevention.
Okay. Okay, fascinating. So I think I read in 2012, UNODC and the government of Pakistan released the first ever nationwide survey on drug abuse in the country. Has that been repeated since, and what were the main findings?
Well, we're trying to do another study now. In fact, we'd initiated the process because it is overdue. The last one was 2013.
Yeah.
But because of the COVID pandemic, it's on hold, but it's something we hope to conclude in the coming year. The 2012 survey it was published the next year in 2013, showed that there is a problem here. I mean, in that year, I think 6.7 million people had abused drugs.
Wow.
Of those, 4.25 million had drug use disorders, meaning they had addiction and were using drugs frequently. And then if you drill down further, 430,000 were injecting drug users.
Wow. Yeah.
So there is a major problem here, and one we need to work hard to address.
What are the most common drugs that you find being abused here in Pakistan?
Well, if you look at drugs around the world, I mean, in Pakistan, the most common drug abuse would be cannabis or derivatives, which is a depressant. Opioids is the other large challenge. Opioids are abused. You also have synthetic drugs and increasing numbers and diversity of synthetic drugs. Stimulants, amphetamine type stimulants, a group of drugs collectively termed as ecstasy. Cocaine comes in that family as well, but you don't see much in the way of cocaine.
Okay. So it's a big taboo in Pakistan. It's not talked about that much even though it's a widely spread problem all over the world, not just in Pakistan. What is the government and the UNODC doing to tackle this particular issue that people are not willing to talk about it so openly?
Well, stigma is a big challenge, and with the important thing to understand with drug abuse is it's UNODC, we consider it a multifactorial health disorder. The UN sees it as a multifactorial health disorder, meaning it has a health solution, not a crime solution.
Right.
And the reason people may try drugs or get addicted to drugs are many. I mean, there can be genetic factors, socioeconomic factors, environmental factors. So it's to break down the stigma, the first is that people very much understand that it's a health problem, and that the people with this disorder need our help. So we need to support them as if they that we need to support them for the health condition that they have.
Right.
So get together as families, as communities, and reach out and show that there won't be discrimination, that they'll be supported and treated that way.
Yeah. And what are the most vulnerable groups that you find here in Pakistan who get addicted to drugs?
Yeah, there are many factors which lead people to take drugs. Socioeconomic hardship. If people have faced hardship in their life, in their family situation, they can turn to drugs for relief. It can depend on peer pressure, the groups who they're associating with. Particularly, that's a concern with young people and trying synthetic drugs. So there are many factors which lead people to take drugs.
Absolutely. And I mean, I read about the work you're doing with female prisoners. How do these women end up getting addicted to drugs most of the time? Is it does it happen in the prison or already before that?
It's from, again, referring back to this study we did, it's from before.
Right.
And, we've done a number of case studies. It can be related to severe hardship, people who are poverty,
right.
Having to work on the streets, difficulties getting by, being drawn into fringe criminal activities as well.
Yeah.
And so then, you have vulnerable populations in prisons as well. UNODC has a mandate to work in prisons. I mean, we help countries around the world meet the United Nations minimum standards for the treatment of prisoners, otherwise often referred to as the Nelson Mandela rules.
Right.
And that those guidelines lay out 120 conditions which countries try to meet, and one of them is also recognising that there are vulnerable groups, that there are minorities in prisons, and these people may have special needs, and we need to support these people. And it may be people, maybe women, people living with HIV. People with different sexual orientation.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you've met some of the most dedicated counterparts here in Pakistan. So maybe can you share one particular encounter with somebody that was particularly inspiring, or a project that you think is making a great impact here?
Well, I mean, it's hard to single anyone out. I feel like I feel very privileged. I feel like I've arrived in Pakistan at a time when there's a great motivation to make a big difference in many of the areas in which we work.
Okay.
If I look at the big rule of law programs, I mean, we worked first in Baluchistan and Sindh, and it brings all the stakeholders together. The head of the province, the secretary, the heads of police, prisons, judiciary, all together in the same room around the table to discuss, well, how can we reduce crime in our province? How can we improve support to people who are survivors or victims of crime? And I've every step of the way, I've just seen a complete passion and commitment to improve the situation in the country. With the Ministry of Narcotics Control and the Health Minister, I mean, we've been working on a new initiative endorsed by the Prime Minister to improve the regulatory framework for drug treatment in the country.
Okay,
which can make, going back to what we said before on stigma, it will make a big difference on the support we can provide to people throughout the country, the understanding of the issue.
Absolutely.
So the same with our action to counter terrorism. I mean, we launched a large national program together with the Minister of Interior, and again a total commitment to make a difference in this area through every aspect, from investigations to judiciaries to witness protection, outreach and social advocacy to raise awareness of risks with the community. So I feel sort of lucky. When I came here, doors have opened, and I have wonderful counterparts, and we're making headway on so many fronts.
That's amazing.
It's really a nice time to be here.
Yeah, great. So going back to the lack of awareness about drug abuse in the country, I mean, if we talk about like young people in Pakistan and the kind of peer pressure there can be sometimes to take drugs, could you share some of the most common dangers associated with drug abuse?
Well, with young people, one of the things we're seeing is there's an increase in abuse of synthetic drugs. It's a phenomenon which has existed in many parts of the world, and where this was a significant message in our world drug report this year. You know, it showed that in 2018, 269 million people around the world had taken drugs, and that's a 30% increase on 10 years earlier.
Wow.
And while that's partly due to population growth, it's showing that drugs are more available in more potent forms and more diverse than ever before.
Yeah.
So it really is a risk, and as a result, when it comes to education and awareness in young people, you constantly have to evolve your prevention messaging and your education.
Yeah.
This is something which can never stop. Pakistan actually has taken a leading role in the region in this field. If I can remember the convention, every year there's a commission on narcotic drugs where all the countries of the world come together to discuss drug issues, and at the 2018 commission, Pakistan sponsored a resolution on prevention in education settings.
Okay.
So Pakistan actually drafted the resolution and got support from member states, and it was adopted by consensus.
Amazing.
And so as a basis on this, you don't want a resolution just to sit on the shelf and do nothing. So we very quickly were able to hold a regional conference here. We brought experts from all over the region and even from further afield to discuss this issue, how the situation's changing, what we can better do in terms of outreach, messaging, in terms of protecting students and people at education institutions.
Yeah.
And since then we've piloted we have 2 pilots of prevention programs which are based on evidence, and they bring families and schools and children together to discuss the drug issues in a family and school setting. And these programs have been shown in other parts of the world to reduce risk-taking behaviour among children, to raise awareness. So all of these things are happening as a follow-on for that. So we are actually working on these prevention and outreach activities.
So that's really inspiring that kind of work is actually taking place here in Pakistan.
Yes.
All right, time for another break. I'll see you in a bit. Welcome back. I'm here in conversation with Jeremy Milsom from the UNODC. So now with the coronavirus everywhere in the world, we've seen the main UN agency, WHO, taking the lead in this matter, of course. But UNODC has also been working on this issue. How does that fit in with your mandate exactly?
Well, I think here in Pakistan, the UN family has done very well. I mean, from the very start, I think there are 20 agencies operating here, and we very quickly got together to look at what each agency can do, where we need to support related to our mandate. And yes, the burden of the health response very much falls on WHO, and I think WHO here in partnership with the government have done a really good job on tracking and monitoring and adapting to the situation as we understand it. The UN family as a whole, all agencies, I mean, we worked together to do a socio-economic assessment to understand, you know, the likely impact that COVID-19 would have on the country, not just the health response, but, you know, the economic hardship and how we should work and where we should support. So the UN has very much worked as a team. Now, UNODC, because of our specific mandate, there were certain areas where we had to work very quickly. One of them was prisons, because prisons are environments where, you know, they're relatively crowded. We work with vulnerable groups. We discussed this earlier. I mean, people who are HIV positive, for example, are far more vulnerable. And
of course.
So UNODC globally very quickly developed guidelines for how prisons can adapt and put in safeguards for the COVID-19 situation, protect vulnerable groups. So that became part of the overall response. The other area where we worked very quickly was an area we discussed earlier, which is with people people with drug use disorders.
Okay.
You know, it's very difficult with most of the medical services now dedicated to the health response. People getting treatment for drug disorders, it's not urgent, and it's not possible. So we're looking at means to do this virtually through outreach, hotlines, and so on. So we're playing our part as part of the wider UN response.
Okay. You've also been distributing some masks and gloves and protective equipment. Where have you been distributing these things?
Well, then, to go more broadly, if we look at all of the areas of UNODC that I was discussing before, I mean, with the COVID-19 situation, a lot of our challenges don't go away. And what we're finding, for example, is illicit drug seizures are continuing despite the COVID-19 situation. So we very quickly assessed all of our programs. We looked at what we could repurpose urgently for an urgent humanitarian response to COVID-19. We looked at how we can operate in the COVID-19 environment, a lot of our activities. So we moved to virtual connectivity for conferences we would have had in person. Some things we postponed. Then in terms of emergency responses, you know, the health workers are on the front line, but police and law enforcement are also on the front line, interacting with the community. They need to ensure, you know, orderly health responses, that communities are supported, that they understand. So in terms of provision of PPE from UNODC, well, we've provided PPE to prisons, but also to our counterparts working in law enforcement and in the counterterrorism program as well.
And what about the Sustainable Development Goals? Has it impacted that at all?
Well, the Sustainable Development Goals, I think, if you may be aware, the UN is going through a reform process, and the Sustainable Development Goals guide all of the UN and all of the agencies. And there are risks for setbacks, obviously, but the UN is working together to ameliorate these risks and to keep the goals on track. UNODC, we support many of the goals, the goal 16 on access to justice. So, you know, we're doing what we can to keep that on track. As I mentioned earlier, the socioeconomic plan to reach the most vulnerable groups, how we can account for the situation that COVID's created and ensure that the most vulnerable people around the country continue to get the support that they need, working hand in hand with the government, which is through its ESAS program has you know, great plan and mechanisms in place. So we're aware, you know, we're doing what we can to ensure that we learn from the COVID and that we you know, double our efforts to make sure that achieving the Sustainable Development Goal stays on track. Yeah,
hopefully. And I mean, it's such a new situation for any country. Nobody's ever been through something like that. So it must have been challenging to so quickly come up with all these responses inside the UNODC as well, and the UN system.
Yes. I think it goes back to something I said right in the start. It's not a quiet time. I've actually never been so busy in my life.
Right, exactly.
It's we're putting in very long hours, and the whole team's working very hard to respond to the situation and to keep everything on track.
Yeah. So now, on a little bit more lighter note, before the lockdown happened in March, I mean, you did have some time to explore the country. Where did you travel in Pakistan?
Well, I haven't been to enough places yet. I mean, I visited, of course, Lahore and Karachi. I've been to Peshawar. So really just the big cities at this stage.
All right.
But looking forward to seeing a lot more of the country.
Yeah. Was there like a city that you liked in particular, or all of them were interesting in their own way? Like a favorite trip that you had, maybe?
Well, every place is fascinating and so interesting, and even the cities, I've barely seen them.
Yeah.
I mean, I've just
so
been in and
huge,
out for
right?
meetings, but the most rewarding trip so far, I did one trip to Gujarat and Gujranwala, and we opened a protection centre for women and children that are victims of crime and violence. And I had the privilege to open that centre in partnership with the police there, and we had many community leaders speaking at the event, and I got to listen to many of the community leaders. There were more women than men at the event, which was and lots of inspiring speeches and discussions and words. So that was so far a particularly rewarding trip for me.
Wow. So most of your trips have been like work related then?
All of them. I haven't had a chance to travel for leisure yet.
Okay. But your family has visited you here, right?
Yeah, my wife and younger two children were here for 2 weeks at the very end of the year, last year. And at that point, we'd actually been apart also for almost 6 months.
Oh, wow.
So we just enjoyed being a family again for 2 weeks.
For sure.
And just did sightseeing around Islamabad.
Okay, where did you take them here?
Well, up into the hills and to the shopping centres.
Yeah. Did they like it here?
Actually, they loved it.
Really?
They loved it. They very much enjoyed it. They enjoyed the food.
Okay.
They were very comfortable here.
Yeah. What about you? Do you like the food here?
Yes, I mean, I love the food. That's one of the great things about travelling, I find, is trying new food. It's in different places. I try and eat just about everything.
Oh, yeah?
So, yeah.
Any favorites here?
Well, I mean, all the curries and bread is delicious. And I love the desserts too.
Yeah.
We all went out to a restaurant when my family was here, and I think there were 6 or 7 desserts, and we tried all of them.
Oh, wow.
And the unanimous favourite was actually, not sure dal ka halwa.
Okay, all right.
In that particular restaurant, it was apparently more a village recipe, and it was just crunchy and delicious. We all loved it. So.
Great. So then if they do move here with you, then they won't have any problems living in Pakistan for quite some
not
time.
at all.
Yeah.
My children have sort of grown up living in different parts of the world. They love spicy food. So.
Sure. So once the lockdown or the coronavirus situation ends, hopefully soon, one day, what is the first place you want to visit, aside maybe from Australia, of course, but maybe in Pakistan?
Well, I grew up in the mountains in Australia, and I mentioned skiing. I skied from when I was knee high. So when I get the chance for a leisure trip, I want to head north. I want to see some of these beautiful mountain places like Skardu I've heard about. And I understand there's a ski resort in KPK.
Yes,
I've been invited to go, and I'm very much looking forward to skiing in Pakistan.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. So definitely the north fascinates you then.
Yeah. Yes, well, yeah, I like mountains, but there's many wonderful places to see. I mean, there's the historical sites in the south, the coastal areas. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more of Pakistan.
Hopefully. And what about here in Islamabad? What do you like to do here in your free time?
Well, again, I haven't had that much free time since this crisis started. I did join the walking group. There's a number of hiking groups.
Okay.
An easy one, a medium one, and an intense one. So I joined the intense groups. I've done some really nice hikes in the Megalas.
Amazing. Which trail is your favorite?
Well, that group, which call themselves the Freaks, tend to go off trail. So I've done some very big hikes. I hiked up one which was, I think, past all the trails right up to the highest peak. So.
Oh, that's amazing. How long did that take?
I think it took 6 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I would be way too lazy to do that. Yeah. But I guess you got to see like the entire city and the sights were amazing.
Yes, yeah. It's really beautiful views up there and beautiful scenery and fresh air. It's lovely.
So how long do you think you'll stay in Pakistan still?
Well, I mentioned that UNODC, we don't really have set times on our posts. So all my postings with UNODC have been a long time. I was actually 10 years in Myanmar, 5 years in Afghanistan and 5 years in Uzbekistan. So I suspect it will be at least 5 years.
Okay. Wow. Okay, then it's time for a rapid fire round. Okay. Are you ready?
Yes, I think so. Let's try.
Okay. Shalwar kameez or suit?
Shalwar kameez for the future.
Yeah.
I'm tired of wearing suits. They're too hot. I have worn a kameez and it's very comfortable in hot weather.
Absolutely. Right for the weather. Great. Lahore or Karachi?
You can't choose.
No?
Can't choose. They're both interesting, barely scratched the surface. Looking forward to exploring them both much more.
Fair enough. Tashkent or Islamabad?
Tashkent or Islamabad? That's hard to choose as well. They're both similar cities. I know this is rapid fire, but the countries have a lot in common.
Yeah.
And I think there's a great future in relations between Pakistan and Uzbekistan, and I'd love to see the prime ministers get together. Both beautiful, peaceful, wide open cities with lots of green space and lovely people. I can't choose.
Okay, both. Fair enough. Chicken biryani or mutton karai?
Mutton karai.
Really? Shane Watson or Aaron Finch?
Shane Watson.
All right. I wouldn't have a clue about either one of them. I don't know anything about cricket, but I'll trust you on that one.
I used to spin. I played cricket as a child.
Oh, wow. Great. Okay. Melbourne or Sydney?
Melbourne.
Okay. Kangaroos or camels?
Kangaroos.
Okay. Football or cricket?
Football as in soccer or rugby? Okay,
let's say soccer.
Yeah, because I'm a rugby person.
All right.
Well, I have to say cricket because I'm not so familiar with football.
Okay. The first thought that comes to your mind when I say Margalla Hills?
Fresh air.
Northern areas of Pakistan?
Beautiful mountains.
Kartarpur Corridor?
I was there. What a wonderful thing to be a part of history.
Great.
What an amazing achievement.
Mangoes?
Pakistan has the best mangoes in the world.
That's true. I agree. The best thing about Pakistan?
Oh, the people. The people. They're just so warm, so welcoming, so lovely. I feel part of a family here. I've felt completely welcome the whole time I've been here. It's really... And that's making my stay wonderful during these difficult times.
Amazing. Great. Okay, then it is time for you to sign our visitor's book.
Well, thank you.
Okay, let's see what you wrote. I feel privileged to live and work in such a diverse, beautiful country with wonderful people and counterparts committed to the UN ideals and making a difference in countering drugs and crime. Thank you so much for being on the show, and I hope you continue to have a wonderful time in Pakistan.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. That's it for today. Please join me again next week, and don't forget to follow us on our social media accounts at indus.news. And stay home, stay safe. Goodbye.